Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the 2021 Canadian general election results and taking a look at what they mean for the future of Canada and for the world politically speaking. So, in case you missed it, last night the Liberal Party held on to their plurality of seats in Parliament, meaning that Justin Trudeau will be Prime Minister for the near future. The next election is scheduled to be held on somewhere in October 2025. But if Trudeau calls a snap election before that, which is always possible, it could be held 2022, 2023, 2024, but it has to be held by October 2025. So that's basically how it works in parliamentary democracy, same way in Britain, same way in, I believe, Germany, Canada as well. So the Liberal Party had a very meh night. It was the definition of a mediocre performance. They held on to Parliament, they did very okay, and, they kind of did what the polls had them at. So, the polls, just to take a look at the final polling, most polls had the Liberals narrowly ahead in the popular vote of the Conservatives. There were, of course, some that had the Conservatives up. I know Abacus and Angus Reid were, a little more bullish on their chances than Councillor Innovative. Innovative was actually, what I would consider to be kind of the St. Pete's polls, or Ecos of Canada, because I know it's being obscured by my screen screen thingy, but Ecos actually did. I wish there was a way I could zoom in here, but not Ecos, excuse me. Innovative actually had the Liberals winning, I think, the popular vote by 5%. And if my voice was obscured there, it was because I have pretty bad eyesight. I have glasses. I was leaning into my computer to see what their final tally was. I knew that they were the best poll for the Liberals, but they did have them up by, I believe, 5% if I know how to read. And, it's always possible because it's super small on my screen, but they did have the Liberals winning by 5%. So the Liberals ended up losing the popular vote by about 2%. So the exact number is 1.6%. It's going to fall a little bit. It was, it was at, I think, 3 or 4% when I went to bed. I go to bed pretty early. I go to bed like 11. I didn't check the results, but at 11 I checked them at like 10:30 Pacific time. And the Liberals, I think they're behind the popular vote by 3.5%. So they're going to likely finish this election down the popular vote by essentially the same margin that they lost by in 2019, which is 1.2%. Maybe a little more, maybe like 1.4, 1.5%. But that's still a popular vote loss for them. That's still not super good. But unlike in America, the Liberals actually benefit from the popular vote in political geography. In America, the Democrats, to have a decent year, they have to win the popular vote at the congressional level by 3 or 4% at the very least. And same goes for the Electoral College. Like Hillary Clinton, she won the popular vote by 2% in 2016, lost the Electoral College by a couple thousand votes spread across a couple of states. If she won the popular vote by 3% nationwide, she would have been elected president. But the issue for the Conservatives in Canada is that they do the Liberals, they do very well in a couple of a couple of ridings that are competitive. Like they do well in Toronto, they do well in St. Leonards, they do well in Kitchener, they do well in London, they do well in Mississauga, excuse me. And other than that, they're not too prominent. The NDP wins a couple of those rural working class seats. The Bloc Québécois, they do quite well in Quebec. But when you look at some of these seats, this is a random Fort McMurray Cold Lake. The Conservatives are getting insane numbers here. They're getting 2/3 of the vote in a 6 or 5-way race, right? And when you go to Toronto, which is the reddest or most liberal part of Canada, if I click on a random seat there, the Liberals are winning, but the Conservatives are still cracking 1/4 of the vote, and the Liberals don't usually crack 60%. And this is about as red of a seat as you can get. Christy Duncan, very safe incumbent this year, and she won because her seat is right in the middle of Toronto, which is, of course, the big urban center of Canada. So the Conservatives have a geography problem in Canada where they they have so the Conservatives, I guess the best way to describe it is they have a very, very high very, very high floor, but a very low ceiling. They're always going to be in that 100 to 150 range. There is no scenario where the Conservatives get 80 seats, unless there's a huge wave. Even in 2015 was a massive red wave for the Liberals. In 2015, kind of like the 2008 of Canadian elections, the Conservatives were at 99, which was their worst performance imaginable. They lost essentially every single seat they could have lost and then some. So the fact that they were at 100 seats, essentially, when they, in their worst possible election, that shows that they have quite a big base. Now the Liberals in 2011, which is a pretty bad election for them, they were only at 34 seats. that's it. The NDP was actually the opposition party. They had more seats than the Liberals. Like, the Liberals, they had some seats in the Maritimes, they had some seats in Newfoundland, they had some seats in Toronto, as you can see here, but it was mostly NDP and Conservative. They had the seat in Saskatchewan. But really, the Liberals had a very, very bad showing in that election. They only had like 34 seats. So the Liberals have quite a lot of room to grow in Canada, and they had a path to a majority. Didn't happen, but they had a path. But at the same time, they also have a path to only having 50 or 60 seats. The Conservatives, they have a very slim path to a majority. It was not expected to happen this time, but they do, kind of have that safety net of always having around at least 100 seats, which is, that's a lot of seats. To have at least a third of a parliament being safe for your vote, that's a lot. That is that's pretty important. So the Conservatives, like I said, don't have the geography advantage, have a lot of disadvantages in Canada, but one advantage that they do have is that they have the biggest base, pure base, of the parties. Now, let's just take a look again at my prediction. So my prediction was that the Liberals would end up with 157 seats, 121 for the Conservatives, 33 for the NDP, 2, Greens falling down to 2, Bloc Québécois, that was really my biggest miss of this election. I had them losing seats. I actually said they were going to lose seats for sure. I said on Twitter, I said the Bloc would be lucky to actually gain seats this election. They'd be very lucky to crack 32. And I had them at 26. It looks like they're going to be at 34, 35 seats as of right now. So the Bloc Québécois right now were my biggest miss of this election. But I'm actually going to say I'm pretty proud of my prediction for this election. I had the Liberals, again, at 157. And, they got 150. They're on track to win 158. That could change. I think that they might actually win 160 because there are 3 ridings left, and I think that they're actually in a position to win, and they're probably going to come back in at least 2 of those. So if you were to drive my feet to the fire, see how many seats are the Liberals going to have at the end of the day, I'd say maybe 159, 160, 161. My prediction for 157 is if all the leads hold right now, which 1 or 2 are probably going to flip around, I would be exactly 1 seat off for the Liberals. For the Conservatives, I would be 4 seats off. But out of 338 seats, I think that's a pretty solid prediction. I'm pretty proud of what I did for this election. I'm glad that I made a prediction because even though I am, I would say, I'm more skilled with American politics. And again, I still have a lot to learn. Anyone who tells you they know everything about politics is lying. Like, I don't think anyone is America's #1 elections guy, right? But I'm glad that I made a prediction for this election, and I'm glad that I did research on this election in the month prior because I'm pretty proud of this prediction. So, as I was saying, the Conservatives likely to finish with 117. They're actually leading in 119, so I might actually be closer. I knew they were at 117 at some point, so I'm kind of hoping the Conservatives get up to 119, maybe win 2 more, so that I can say that I got their amount of seats right. The Liberals, they're leading in 158. They've I think there's only been 1 call over the past few hours, and it's been for the Liberals, and again, 158 would be pretty cool because I'd only be a seat off, but 157 would be ideal. Obviously, I'm kind of messing around because I don't, this is not me expressing favor for the Conservatives or the Liberals, but it would be funny if I got the exact amount of seats right for the 2 largest parties. Now, as I mentioned, the Bloc Québécois, they're currently leading in 34. I'm not sure if I know where the seats they're leading in that they haven't been called for yet. They're probably in southern Quebec or in Quebec City. Oh, here's one, Marilou Alarie. I hope I got it right. My pronunciation of French words, I really need to work on that. She's leading in this seat, which is kind of a suburban seat, Quebec City / Montreal. Then I'm trying to find the other one. I'm guessing it's in Quebec City because I said Quebec City. Montreal's the biggest, but I said Quebec City has the most likely the most undecided voters that could be switching back and forth between the Bloc and the Liberals. I wrote that in my Substack article, I remember. But anyways, we don't have to spend too much time talking about that. But I did actually, I did miss the Bloc. I had them at 26th. They're probably going to hold on to 34 seats, which is impressive. And in their vote share, I had them at 6.4%. They were going to end up with 7.8% of the vote. So I did underestimate this. I did underestimate the Bloc this election, but it looks like I'll be pretty good with the Conservatives and the Liberals. The NDP, I had them at 33. They're going to be at 25. So that was a pretty disappointing showing for them because they only gained a seat despite polls showing them gaining 4 or 5% of the popular vote. And they got 17.7% of the popular vote. They got, I think, 16% in 2020. And when we look at the polls, the NDP was at 19, 20, 21, 19, 20, 18, 16. Forum was pretty good. Innovative had it 22. Ipsos had them at 21. Ledger had them at 19. Main Street had them at 18. Nanos had them at 18. Research & Co. Research Co had 19, YouGov had 19. So they were both had him, up to 22%. They were both had him at 16%. So it looks like the 16 to 18% of people got it right. But this was a very disappointing showing for the NDP. I think that there are going to be a lot of serious questions about Jagmeet Singh as leader of this party. Personally, I think they should replace him if they want to gain more seats by 2025, but that's just me. I know there are a lot of people that really like Jagmeet Singh, but I think that he is not the right leader for them because the NDP needs to position themselves right. Because here's my thing with the NDP and the Liberals. Canada is a progressive country. The only way that the NDP are going to actually pick off a significant amount of votes from the Liberals, and the only way they're actually become a dominant force in politics that has, more than 40 or 50 seats, they have to do that by not trying to appeal, not to, kind of call out Jagmeet Singh here because the NDP had a lot of problems during this election, but he was spending, I felt like his campaign was terminally online. He had, he has a following on TikTok, which is great, but he was, I think he was trying to appeal to a very significant, to a very small demographic of, college kids who think that TikTok is cool, right? And that's a group that he did well with, but they're going to do well with that no matter what. I don't think that TikTok really helped him with the college demographic. What I think he needs to do, and I'll point out one seat in particular in a second, but the NDP used to be the party of working class voters. They shifted to the Conservatives this election, and we saw this in 2016. The Democrats were the party of working class voters until they weren't when Donald Trump flipped them, nearly all of them in 2016. So the NDP, they don't want the working class voters to revert back to what they were, 15 years ago with the Conservatives, right? They need a resurgence soon with the working class voters, and I think that the way they do that is not by posting TikToks, but instead by positioning themselves as the pro-union, pro-labor party. Now, the seat I referenced earlier was Kootenay, Columbia. So Kootenay, Columbia was a seat that the NDP were expected to win narrowly, and they lost it by 8%. So not a terrible margin, but Rob Morrison he defeated Wayne Stetsky, who was actually the incumbent, and that's not a good that's not a good sign in a seat that is kind of rural and there's one big working class town, and the Conservatives flipped it by a pretty comfortable margin. So I think there are lessons that need to be learned on every side. The Liberals, this was a close call. There was a point where they were trailing in the popular vote in the polls, nearly every poll. There are some polls that had them down by 7 or 8 nationally. That would have been a disaster if they actually lost their plurality of seats because, they were lucky to cling on to that plurality. They still have a minority government, but Justin Trudeau is still Prime Minister, which, they avoided disaster. But this election could have gone way worse for them. The Conservatives, I think they actually ran a pretty solid campaign. I know there are people who are criticizing Erin O'Toole, but I think he did a pretty good job. He took a situation where they were, snap elections are always beneficial to the party in power because they call it during the exactly right time or what they think is the right time, and the other parties are, supposed to be disorganized. The Conservatives were disorganized heading into this election. There was a hot battle between, Andrew Scheer, Erin O'Toole, and I believe Mike McKay. I'm forgetting his first name. He was actually the founder of the Conservative Party. He wanted to be a leader, but they picked O'Toole, and really, they got it together. They were not in a position to gain or they were not in a position to be in a position to actually think about gaining seats. But they only lost 4 seats. This was not a great election for the Conservatives, but they still had a decent night in terms of it could have been a loss worse. It could have been a lot worse. The Bloc Québécois, once again, they overperformed my expectations. Francois Blanchet, I think he's a pretty good leader. I really like what he's doing. I mean, not from a political standpoint, but I like what he's done as leader for the party. He's done a pretty good job. And, the Bloc, they essentially, in every riding they're competitive in, they carried nearly all of them. They did well in rural Quebec, as you can see over here. They held on to seats that were kind of in, farmland in the south. They held on to seats in Quebec City and in Montreal. So the Bloc Québécois, this is not a bad night for them at all. They overperformed a lot of people's expectations, including mine. And, the polls had them at 5 or 6%. They won nearly 8% of the popular vote, so not too shabby for them. The NDP, like I said, I think that Jagmeet Singh is not the right leader for them. I think they need a more pro-working class leader. Singh, he's a strong debater. He has a lot of charisma, but I just don't think he's what they need. For the Green Party, this was a pretty bad election. They weren't expected to do anything. They actually got lucky that they held on to one seat because, their safe seat was not Ladysmith. It was the Saanich Gulf Islands, which Elizabeth May held on to. She won easily, but, I think they lost Ladysmith, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, right here. Paul Manley lost here. Here's the incumbent. Manley ended up losing this race by 4%. So, the incumbent Green, he lost there. And then their other seat they were competitive in was Animi Paul seat in somewhere in Toronto. I don't know the exact riding, but it was pretty bad there. They also lost Fredericton. They were supposed to be competitive there. They only got but 13% of the vote there with Nicola Byrne. She did not do very well there. But the most disappointing, or the most, not disappointing, the most weird result for the Greens was in Kitchener Centre. So in Kitchener Centre, as you can see, they actually won the seat. You know, they're not expected to win it, but the Liberals essentially just, they kind of gave up at the end. And it was just the Greens versus the Conservatives. And this is a pretty blue seat. So Mike Morris, or not blue, a red seat. I said blue because I was, thinking progressive, which is the Democrats in America, where I'm from. But red seat meaning liberal, excuse me. But Mike Morris was able to pick it off for the Greens. So, Kitchener Centre was kind of a lucky win for them. They're probably going to lose the next election, but they're going to hold on to Kitchener Centre for now. Anyways, but the Greens, still a pretty bad election for them. Elizabeth May is like the only figure in their party who's safe for the next few years in politics. Like I said, Morris probably going to lose next election because of what happened this year. But yeah, the PPC, they're kind of a meme of a party. And like, I don't mean to say that to disrespect them, but I just think that, for Maxime Bernier to try to run again in Beauce, right? He ran again. Let me find it. It's somewhere over here, right here. He was the leader of the party. He only got 18% of the vote in this election. So he did not do very well here, and I just think that his party needs to be a little more organized in the future for them to actually compete in a few ridings, because their best showing was 18% of the vote in one riding that they'd previously held. So, in my humble opinion, I don't think that's a very good showing for them. But if I had to rank the winners of this election, I'd say 1 is definitely the Bloc Québécois. 2 would be the Liberals because they held on to their majority and did a little better than the polls had them doing. They also outperformed my forecast a little bit, of course. 3 would probably be the Conservatives, because, this is a meh election for them. Could have been better, but could have been a lot worse as well, given the circumstances. Like, if you told me the Conservatives will only lose 3 seats, or actually 2 seats because they're leading 119, 2 seats heading into this election, in August, I would have said that's not bad for them at all. So, Conservatives did solve this election. Then I'd say everyone else was a loser. Like, the NDP definitely underperformed. The Greens lost a seat, and, they'd be lucky. They were lucky to actually get that second one in Kitchener Centre. But yeah, so that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked my analysis on Canadian politics, leave a like. Also, comment if I should do this more, because my previous video for the prediction that came out on Monday, it got pretty good feedback. It got over 1,000 views. It got, I think, over 50 likes. So I'm pretty glad with the feedback I got for that video. I thought it would have no views because most of you guys are American, but I'm glad you gave it a chance, and I'm glad that I found some new viewers in the comment section telling me about their story, especially if they're from Canada. But comment down if I should do more for an election analysis. I know there's an election in Germany on the 26th, so I might talk about that. But yeah, so with that being said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.